In 1931, the formidable steam locomotives of the Rio Grande Southern, once the very essence of life for Colorado's mountainous terrain, were draining the railway's resources, with each mile consuming more than a full week's earnings. As entire communities faced potential starvation if mail delivery ceased, locals scoffed when a desperate mechanic unveiled a worn-out sedan, jury-rigged onto rail wheels. They dismissed it as a car on rails, an absurdity too preposterous to salvage anything. Yet, while the massive engines languished in their sheds, this peculiar contraption was poised to confront winter, blizzards, and financial ruin, all while transporting renewed hope into the mountains. What ensued would determine the survival of both the railway and the towns clinging precariously to its existence. Receivership meant meticulous accounting for every dollar, transforming every mile of track into a burden. The Rio Grande Southern's ledgers from 1931 resembled a chronicle of last resorts rather than a strategic business blueprint. Steam engines, once the pride of the peaks, had become a financial anchor, dragging the railway into insolvency. Payroll records indicated that at least 5 individuals were needed for each journey: an engineer, a fireman, a conductor, and 2 brakemen. Every trip demanded tons of coal, gallons of water, and countless hours of upkeep, merely to transport a handful of passengers and the daily mail. The balance sheet bled red ink as the per-mile cost of operating a single train skyrocketed, while revenue from freight and tickets dwindled. Court-appointed receiver Victor Miller issued drastic directives. A 30% reduction was mandated across all expenditures, without exception. Crews were downsized, maintenance was postponed, and the roundhouse fell eerily silent, save for the infrequent whistle of a locomotive dispatched only when absolutely necessary. The railway's lifeline, the mail contract, came with a stern warning from the Interstate Commerce Commission. Miss a single delivery, and the government could revoke the agreement. No mail meant no funds, and no funds spelled the end for every community along the route. The figures spoke for themselves. Each time a steam locomotive departed the yard, the railway incurred losses. The per-mile expenses, wages, coal, water, and repairs, far exceeded the diminishing payments from the post office. The company's own records confirmed it. Operating a full train for a solitary mailbag and 3 passengers was sheer folly. The Interstate Commerce Commission's threat loomed over every decision. Should service falter, abandonment proceedings would commence, and the tracks would be dismantled for scrap. With minds shuttered and the depression deepening, there was nothing left to transport but hope, encapsulated within the mail sacks that arrived each morning. On paper, the Rio Grande Southern was doomed. However, in the repair shops at Ridgeway, where the ledger's ink stains intersected with the mechanic's grime, a different kind of calculation was about to begin. In the shadow of the San Juan peaks, the towns clung to existence by a fragile steel thread. Telluride and Rico relied on the daily train not merely for correspondence or news from the outside world, but for the necessities of life. Every sack of flour, every carton of canned goods, every bottle of medicine, none of it reached these mountain valleys except by rail. The postman's keys unlocked more than just mailbags. They opened up pay packets for miners still clinging to hopes of employment, government checks that sustained families, and the rare parcels that brought a glimmer of solace to homes ravaged by the Depression. When the train failed to arrive, the world rapidly contracted. General store shelves emptied. The bank awaited its next currency shipment. Doctors' offices carefully rationed pills, knowing new supplies might not materialize for weeks if the tracks fell silent. Snow could isolate wagon roads for months. Telephone lines were no match for the ferocious wind and ice. Only the railway, battered as it was, could guarantee a link to the outside world. Children gazed at the tracks, listening for the faint echo of a whistle. Merchants tidied their storefronts, eyes fixed on the distant bend where the train was expected to appear. The rumbling of a locomotive signified hope, a chance that the mail had arrived, that overdue bills could be settled, that families separated by vast stretches of wilderness might hear from their loved ones. Without the train, the towns felt abandoned, forgotten by a nation too preoccupied to acknowledge their plight. Every missed delivery incurred a cost, measured not in dollars, but in empty stomachs and unanswered letters. The specter of losing the railroad was not merely a business concern. It represented the chasm between survival and utter desolation. For the people of these mountains, the destiny of the railway was inextricably linked to the destiny of their towns. And as winter approached, their desperation intensified. A need that no steam engine, however magnificent, could any longer afford to address. Jack Odenbaugh stood in the Ridgeway workshop, sleeves rolled up, the ledger opened to a page screaming in crimson ink. The directive from above was blunt. Construct something inexpensive, or the railway perishes. He gazed at the dilapidated Buick Master 6 parked outside, a vehicle most people would have condemned to the scrap heap. But Jack envisioned a lifeline. He salvaged the engine, the dashboard, even the front seats. The steering wheel was discarded. It was superfluous when the rails dictated the direction of travel. He and his team excised the rear body, leaving the Buick's nose perched on a newly fabricated steel chassis. The original road wheels were exchanged for flanged steel ones, custom-fitted to the narrow-gauge track. Every component was measured twice, not for aesthetic perfection, but to ensure it wouldn't disintegrate on its maiden voyage. The mail's delivery didn't prioritize elegance, so Jack engineered for durability. He welded a formidable cowcatcher to the front, crafted from boilerplate scavenged from a decommissioned locomotive. The boxy mail bed at the rear was constructed from whatever lumber and steel the workshop could spare. Bolts, braces, and patches gave the entire machine the appearance of a limousine that had survived a brutal encounter with a boxcar. The total cost for this experimental endeavor was $850. This was less than the expense of operating a single steam train for an entire week. Forrest White, the superintendent, maintained his distance initially, but he approved every supply requisition and ensured that no one in the office interfered with Jack's progress. The workshop records from June 1931 depict a flurry of overtime and ingenious improvisation. One day involved mounting the drive shaft, the next rigging the brakes with whatever components fit. There was no blueprint, only Jack's intuition and the urgent necessity of a railway teetering on the brink. When the final bolt was tightened, the crew stepped back, gazing in awe. It wavered, it rattled. But when Jack ignited the Buick engine, the entire workshop fell silent, listening. The car on rails was poised to gamble everything on a single journey. The machine Jack Odenbaugh rolled out of the Ridgeway shops was no ordinary rail car. At first glance, it resembled a Buick sedan that had been mugged by a junkyard. A battered hood, steel wheels, a formidable cowcatcher more suited to a full-sized locomotive. Yet, beneath its rough exterior, every design choice was a calculated solution to a railway's last gasp. The Goose's heart was its gasoline engine, a 6-cylinder unit directly from the Buick. Instead of consuming coal by the ton, it merely sipped fuel, readily available at any local filling station. A single tank could transport mail from Ridgeway to Dolores and back for mere pennies per mile. The drive shaft, originally designed to spin rubber tires, was adapted to power a rail truck. Custom couplings and chain reduction gearing matched the engine's output to the steel wheels, allowing the Goose to ascend steep gradients and traverse bridges precariously, structures that steam engines would have shattered. Weight was a critical factor. The Goose tipped the scales at a mere 6 tons, sufficiently light to cross decaying trestles and sagging rails without causing them to collapse. Where a steam locomotive pounded the tracks with each wheel, the Goose glided, its pivoting trucks effortlessly navigating the sharp curves and uneven joints of the mountain line. Less weight translated to less wear and tear, meaning the railway could remain operational even as maintenance budgets evaporated. Crew size dwindled from a full team to just one individual. The driver performed every task. He operated the throttle, applied the brakes at every crossing, loaded the mail, and punched tickets. No fireman, no brakeman, no conductor. Just a solitary operator in the front seat, observing the rails winding through the canyons. This slashed labor costs to the bare minimum, transforming what was once a money-losing route into something the railway could actually sustain. On paper, the Goose's specifications seemed almost comical. A luxury car's engine, a homemade frame, a box bolted to the rear. But when compared to the colossal steam engines rusting in the roundhouse, the figures revealed the stark truth. One man, 6 tons, gasoline by the gallon instead of the ton, and a fuel bill so minuscule it barely registered in the ledger. The true test awaited on the line. But within the workshop, the logic was straightforward and undeniable. Construct a machine light enough to preserve the rails, inexpensive enough to rescue the company, and simple enough for anyone with a wrench to keep it running. Winter on the Rio Grande Southern did not seek permission. The initial snowfall could submerge the rails overnight, transforming every journey into a trial of resilience and fortune. For the individual at the throttle, there was no crew to provide assistance, only a worn toolbox wedged behind the seat and a portable jack rated for 8 tons rattling on the floorboards. The Goose was too light to force its way through snowdrifts, so the flanger blade, a steel wedge bolted beneath the frame, scraped away snow and ice mere inches above the rails. On most days, this sufficed. However, when the snow accumulated higher, the sole recourse was to halt, grab a shovel, and clear a path by hand. Derailments occurred without warning. The track wound through rock cuts and over decaying trestles, and frost heaves could lift a rail just enough to launch the Goose's steel wheels off the line. There was no rescue train waiting. The operator would retrieve the jack, muscle the front end back onto the rails, and inspect for damage before returning to the cab. Often, the sole source of warmth emanated from the engine, with the scent of gasoline and perspiration permeating the confined space. Each mile presented a gamble, a solitary man, a single machine, confronting a mountain of perils. Excuses held no sway for mail. If the Goose failed to complete its journey, paychecks and crucial medical supplies for the towns ahead would similarly falter. Every trip gnawed at both nerves and metal. Yet the alternative was an eerie silence along the tracks, a risk utterly unaffordable to anyone residing in these mountains. Snow relentlessly battered the line throughout the night, accumulating drifts that surpassed the Goose's hood in height. The morning schedule was not a mere suggestion, it was an unwavering promise. The motorman meticulously wiped frost from the windshield and verified the cargo: sacks of mail, a crate of medicine, and a few parcels destined for the store. With a gloved hand, he twisted the ignition. The Buick engine sputtered, caught, and then roared to life. No other assistance was forthcoming. The steam engines remained confined in the roundhouse, too massive for the snow-buried rails. Only the Goose possessed a chance. The first mile vanished beneath the steel wheels, the sharp cry of the horn echoing through the pines and snow. At every drift, the Goose decelerated. The motorman seized his shovel, his boots crunching through the icy crust, manually clearing a path. With numb fingers, he manhandled the Goose back onto the rails, after an concealed switch abruptly knocked the front truck sideways. There was no time for complaints. The mail absolutely had to get through. The telegraph at Rico tapped out an inquiry: train delayed. The reply, recorded in the postmaster's log, stated, "Motor arrived on time, all mail delivered." In the general store, shelves were replenished. The doctor's office restocked its supplies. A child eagerly tore open a letter from a father employed in Denver. The goose's horn sounded once more, not as a jest, but as a sigh of relief. That battered, honking contraption had accomplished what the formidable steamers could not. Through the wind, snow, and silence, it had reconnected the world to the mountains. One journey, one shovel, one resolute driver at a time. The inaugural goose proved its worth amidst the snow and on the ledger. However, it was never intended to be the definitive conclusion of the story. As soon as the Ridgway shop observed the capabilities of a single rail car, the crew promptly commenced expanding the fleet. They initially utilized another Buick, but soon Pierce Arrow limousines, discarded remnants from the golden age of luxury, became the new foundation. The shopmen meticulously extracted the straight 8 engines and mounted them onto frames specifically engineered to withstand the harshest mountain conditions. Each new goose underwent progressive enhancements, including enclosed mail compartments to safeguard parcels from moisture, reinforced boxes for rough freight, and even a third truck beneath the longest bodies, enabling them to navigate sharp curves without binding. The upgraded mail spaces ensured the continuous flow of this vital lifeline, even in weather that would have completely halted larger trains. Aluminum bus bodies significantly reduced weight, allowing the machines to transport more passengers without unduly stressing the rails. By 1933, the price tag for Goose number 5 had reached $2,599. Nevertheless, every dollar contributed to survival. Greater power, increased capacity, and fewer breakdowns. The Ridgway crew did not merely replicate the first Goose. They creatively adapted, welded, and interchanged parts until the entire fleet became a mobile testament to Depression-era resourcefulness. Each machine was progressively less ungainly and significantly more dependable than its predecessor. The venerable rails of the Rio Grande Southern have long since vanished from the mountain valleys. Yet the geese steadfastly refuse to fade into oblivion. Today, their weathered bodies and honking horns continue to resonate across Colorado and beyond. Each one serves as a living testament to survival and to what desperation and ingenuity can collectively forge. Goose number 2 makes its appearance every summer at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, its Pierce Arrow nose and patched mailbox gleaming under the expansive prairie sun. In Dolores, Goose number 5 attracts crowds to the depot, operating special excursions for visitors eager to experience the very seats that once transported miners and mailbags through the majestic San Juans. Goose number 3, defying its Rocky Mountain origins, discovered a new existence at Knott's Berry Farm in California, where it still rattles along rails within the shadow of roller coasters and orange groves. Even Goose number 1, scrapped before the railroad's demise, has experienced a spiritual return. A meticulous replica, crafted in Ridgway, has been faithfully restored to its original eccentric proportions, poised for another journey. These machines, once derided as scrapyard curiosities, now stand polished and proud in museums and towns that cherish their profound significance. The geese outlived the very railroad that brought them into existence, carrying not merely mail, but a narrative truly worth preserving. Currently, the majority of the galloping geese endure, preserved not for their aesthetic appeal, but as tangible proof that necessity remains the mother of invention. As supply chains face increasing pressure and communities confront novel uncertainties, the lesson persists. The solutions that ultimately rescue us frequently begin as mere jokes. Ingenuity may not always appear heroic until everything hinges upon it. What aspects of your contemporary existence, currently serving as sources of amusement, do you anticipate will be crucial for sustained functioning in the future?